Religious liberty is the cornerstone of our Constitution and must be protected as an inalienable human right. The Second Amendment serves to protect the people against domestic and foreign oppression and must be protected as a human right. All citizens, in order to realize their full potential, are entitled to equal rights, equal justice, and equal opportunity, but not equal outcomes. The family is the most essential and most empowering organization in our shared human existence. All life is precious and must be protected. We believe the free enterprise system is the most productive supplier of human needs and economic justice. Fiscal responsibility and budgetary restraint must be exercised by all levels of government. We believe that peace is preserved through a strong national defense. We believe government transparency is essential to maintaining trust and faith with the people. And we believe our history and the associated memoria serve as guideposts in our journey as a nation, to serve as reminders of our shared sacrifices and must be warnings to future generations. So, how we vet candidates. How do we vet candidates that are running against our belief statements? That process begins with a survey request, which is a very thorough survey request, and I believe 1, 2, 3 of the 5 candidates here today have filled out our survey. The survey goes out to our extremely large mailing list in Virginia, especially for the Senate races. That's very important. They will be able to see your surveys all side by side. We're the only organization that does that. In addition to the surveys, go ahead, Chuck. You have a question? You can. Yes, this is a free for all. You can go anytime you need. So we do a survey. As part of that survey, we also ask that you participate in a personal interview, where we do a interview directly with you. We will eventually publish all of the interviews all on the same day, for all of the candidates, also to the email list. After we do the interviews, we take a vetting board of members of Chasing Freedom Virginia. The vetting board looks at and evaluates each of the candidates. We evaluate all the candidates, including the Democrat candidates, against our values, and we score them in secret. So every member of the vetting board scores in secret. None of the other members of the vetting board know how each other voted or how each other scored the other candidates. The only people who will know what the vetting scores are 2 members of the executive board, which will be, in this particular case, in this race, I will not be participating in the betting board because several of the candidates are personal friends of mine. So I will not be participating in the betting board. I will have 1 vote once we do an endorsement, but I will not be participating in the betting board because so many of the candidates are personal friends of mine. So in this particular case, the deadline for the surveys is going to be, I believe it's the 5th of April is the deadline for surveys. We're going to do, and that's also the deadline for the interviews. And then in addition to that, the betting board evaluations will come out on the 10th of April. And then we do our endorsement on the 19th of April. We are endorsing pre-primary. We're one of the few organizations in Virginia that will publish the endorsement pre-primary, and we will distribute it all across the state. I tell everybody it's very important that only one person can get the endorsement. So I love and appreciate and respect all of you for running, but only one person can get the endorsement, just like only one person can get the nomination. But I still challenge you that regardless of whether or not you get this endorsement, that you remember that no one can win by themselves. And it's going to take a team of superheroes to beat the enemy here. So you still got to stay in the fight. The endorsement is only one small piece of the grand strategy of what you're trying to run as a campaign. But we do believe that the Chasing Freedom Virginia endorsement is a very important endorsement in Virginia because it's got its foundation in the grassroots organizations throughout Virginia. That all being said, I'm going to I'm going to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll have Rich Stone, and we'll do our prayer, and then after that, we'll talk about the forum. So everybody please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rich.
Thank you, everyone. Everyone just bow their heads in reverence. Lord God, thank you so much for waking us up today and giving each of us the opportunities to come before you, to seek you first and often. I pray, Lord God, that we would be truth seekers, and ultimately that truth leads to you. Bless this time. Watch over everyone in this room. Thank you for them having the wherewithal and caring enough to come out, especially the candidates. In Christ I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, so the format is going to be, we're going to do, each of you are going to have 5 minutes to do your opening comments and your introduction. After that, I have one brief question that I always ask, and you'll have about 3 minutes to answer that question. And then from there, we'll turn it over to the moderators, and the moderators will ask. We really only have two big questions. One is going to be about about immigration, and the other one's going to be about the economy. But in between those two questions, we're going to open it up for a discussion among all of you, so that it's free for all for about 15 minutes. And we want to hear from you, and the moderators will ask additional follow-up questions to kind of lead the conversation to a successful conclusion. But ultimately, so that we really get a fulsome understanding of where you're at on the two issues, immigration and the economy. I got to do. We also have like a surprise format thing that you guys don't know about yet, and that is we do a randomly generated order. Okay, and the reason we do that is because that way you can't steal each other's good answers in order. Okay. So just let me pull up my random number generator here. Drum roll. I don't know why it can't. It's not the one I want. This is the one I want. Okay. We have 5 candidates, and we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What's your question, Kimberly? I think because we have so many, it'd be better to sit down, because then the camera can just focus on it. Okay. I am not allowing repeats. It'll be a random order, 1 through 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the first person to go, if it will work, is going to be Chuck Smith. 5 minutes.
My name is Chuck Smith. I'm a candidate for United States Senate. I was raised by a grandmother who taught me values, and those values have stayed with me for all of my life. I went home one day, and as I was going into the house, she was in the yard, and I said, "Mama, I have joined the military. This is 1970. And she said, with tears rolling down her eyes, she said, "Stay on that damn ship. Stay on that damn ship." I looked at her and I said, "Mama, I didn't join the Navy. I joined the Marine Corps." And she bursted out and screamed and yelled and said, "Chucky, Chucky, Chucky, my God, what have you done?" That was a time when people weren't coming home in 1970 from Vietnam. They were coming home in body bags. She thought she would never see me again. These values have stayed with me. They've given me strength. She will tell you, if she were here right now, she's deceased, she's gone to heaven, but she would say that Chucky believes in America, no exceptions. Chucky believes in the founding fathers, no exceptions. He believes in God Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, no exceptions. He believes in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the Republic, no exceptions. He believes in the Second Amendment, First Amendment, all of the amendments, no exceptions. You see, it is precisely because I believe that you can count on me to stand for America, stand for Virginia, and by the grace of God, come hell or high water, no matter what, stand and endorse Donald J. Trump as the next president of the United States of America and never let him down. So help me God. I am not a weak, sometime, establishment, sunshine, rhino Republican. I'm America first. That means I am pro-America, pro-life, pro-children, pro-faith, pro-Trump, MAGA, automatically anti-Democrat, and a card-carrying, gun-toting, 100% unapologetic supporter of the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, our men and women in blue. We've got to get our country back. We face so many problems. Cancel culture, wokeism, treating parents like domestic terrorists, COVID, crime, drug policy. We also face the border, immigration, the national debt. And to fix these problems, we need a candidate who is a true conservative, who is not going to buckle. He's not going to bend. I believe we don't need more laws. We need to enforce the laws we've got. As your United States Senator, under our existing laws, they will be held accountable. Those who have arrested an American president for political reasons in an overt attempt to take down, tear down, eradicate, do away with, destroy the United States Constitution's guarantee of fundamental rights to the people, they will be held accountable and subject to treason. Those who have brought home the basketball player doing drugs, but leave behind the Marine to rot in a Russian jail, they will be held accountable and subject to prison. People who have left Americans behind to die like dogs in the evacuation of Benghazi in Afghanistan, they will be held accountable and subject to prison. People who have touched children for the purpose of sex indoctrination, sex reconfiguration, without the full consent of an informed and responsible parent, they will be held accountable. People who have flown balloons over American skies or aircrafts or Chinese flags on American property as a claim of right, they will be held accountable. We've got to get our country back. I say, if you're looking for courage, how about a Marine, 0311, a grunt, ground pounder who enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1970? How about the former chairman of the largest Republican Party city committee in the Commonwealth? How about someone with integrity, a Navy JAG commander retired after 26 years of combined military service? How about somebody born on the 4th of July with patriotism in his veins? My name is Chuck Smith. I'm a candidate for the United States Senate. And of course, I ask for your support. God bless.
Thank you, Chuck. Next person is going to be John Emel.
So, I've been a constitutional lawyer for the last 38 years. I have the record for defeating the Food and Drug Administration on constitutional grounds, which is 8 times. I came to Washington during the Reagan administration, worked in the Federal Communications Commission during President Reagan's era, and that was the era of deregulation of radio and television. All of my adult life, I have believed in limited government and free enterprise, the founding principles of this country, and that was fortified by my advocacy of President Reagan and has ever since been the guiding light in my whole litigation career. So we have a situation in this country where 3/4 of all federal law is not the product of those we elect. We have instead 3/4 of all the laws being made by the unelected heads of over 250 different agencies, bureaus, and departments. As a result, the beautiful constitutional republic that our founding fathers gave us has been transformed into a bureaucratic oligarchy. And now, those who are in charge of this bureaucratic oligarchy want to transform it further. They want to change it into a totalitarian state. So the Constitution hangs by a thread. I've been a constitutional lawyer fighting against this my whole career. Now, I've also written quite a bit of legislation for members of Congress. One bill actually was signed into law by President Trump. I wrote the original iteration of that bill. In its original iteration, it was called the Access to Medical Treatment Act. In its subsequent iteration, it was called the Right to Try Act. The Access to Medical Treatment Act was introduced by Congressman Ron Paul. It would have allowed anyone who had a terminal illness to gain access to an experimental drug without having to get the FDA's approval, without having to get the bureaucrats' approval to save a person's life. I represented a boy, 8-year-old boy, who had a glioblastoma multiforme. His name was Zachary McConnell. I testified before Congress about Zachary. Zachary was allowed to enter a clinical trial by the clinical investigator in Texas, Dr. Stanislaw Brzezinski, and the drug was called anti-neoplastins. Now that drug reduced the tumor in his brain by 1/3. Absolutely miraculous. And yet the FDA came in and said that boy should not be a participant in the clinical trial because he didn't meet the protocol requirements that were set for the clinical trial. And they ordered him back to radiation and chemo. And so his parents were beside themselves. The boy had lost half his body weight when he was treated with radiation and chemo in all the rounds that he had received. And there was no hope that this would save his life. Indeed, no oncologist indicated that it could possibly save his life. So they came to me, they asked me for help. And so I went to the FDA. I first argued to them that if they have any ounce of humanity, they would act to reverse the decision of the staff. They would not do so. I then went to Congressman Dan Burton. Congressman Burton worked with me, and we had an imminent hearing at which the FDA Commissioner von Eschenbach would have to appear and answer to the public for denying numerous children access to this. So out of this, and I must report, unfortunately, while we got von Eschenbach to reverse his decision, it took 30 days to do it, and unfortunately, within that 30 days, the boy's tumor killed him because it grew, it was aggressive, and it infiltrated all parts of his brain, and so the FDA killed that boy. Based on that, I wrote the Access to Medical Treatment Act, which would allow any terminally ill patient to get access to an experimental drug without the FDA's involvement. And then, predicated upon that, which Congressman Ron Paul introduced, he left Congress, and his son, Senator Rand Paul, then introduced the Right to Try Act. The Right to Try Act then was signed into law by President Trump. Now, let me say something about President Trump. There were 4 presidents before him who had a chance to sign that bill. President George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama. Not a one would do it. Donald Trump did it, introducing it in his State of the Union address. In conclusion, we are at a precipice. We are standing on the edge of the loss of the last best hope for freedom on earth. If we don't fundamentally reverse the direction of this country, we will lose freedom. And we will lose it in such a way that it will be very difficult for us to get it back, because this is a totalitarian effort underway. So, we have to save Virginia, save America. That's why I'm running. We have to save the Constitution of the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. And Kimberly, you'll be next.
It's going to be really hard for me to talk without standing up, you guys, because I get very passionate about this. Thank you all for organizing this. This is a job interview for the United States Senate. I want to know what the candidates have done for the state of Virginia. I am the only candidate born and raised in Virginia. I have done things at the local, state, national, and international levels. And this is the end of the line for America. This is the end of the republic. And I feel confident that I could win against Tim Kaine. I am from Southwest Virginia. The song North of Richmond was popular for a reason, because where I'm from, in the majority of the state, people want to vote for someone who is from their state, who has accomplished something. People used to come to me from around multiple counties to solve their problems. Farmers would come to me. They'd have flooding problems. I pulled in the Army Corps of Engineers, the Navy, Mayor, City Council was able to solve river flooding issues. I brought in early COVID testing to rural areas before we knew what COVID was. I've helped open up transitional domestic violence shelters. I've helped bring children home to their parents who were trafficked, and I've helped trafficked victims, as well as people who are strung out on the streets and have had success victims. One of our big issues in Virginia is mental health care access. We don't have it. Our law enforcement has become that. We close our border off to stop the movement of the drugs, and I have a plan to fund what we need to do so that way our law enforcement is not staying up all night long with someone who's strung out, and we make sure that people get the help they need. Roanoke, Virginia, 6th generation where I'm from, actually is kind of ground zero for the opioid epidemic. So if we can solve it in Roanoke, which we're working on, then it's going to be a model really for the rest of the nation. At the international level, just recently, I met with world leaders because everything that is happening in America follows suit in the rest of the world. When America has a good foreign policy, the rest of the world is at peace. So I was invited to a private invite-only summit where it was kind of like a Davos but for conservatives, and we got together to work on the globalist agenda that's affecting everyone. Right now, they're trying to control your food security. They're trying to control how you travel, if you get vaccinated, as part of the huge plan, which is also migrating people across the world. I further met with members of European Parliament and members of Parliament outside of the EU, and as a result, I'm reconstituting a transatlantic partnership between members of the U.S. Congress and members of the European Parliament to work on issues with counterterrorism, to work on the issues with people that are crossing our border. Just in December, we had 40,000 Chinese militants cross over. Not only that, down in Southwest Virginia, we have immigrants that are illegal standing outside of our schools, taking videos of our schools, targeting our children. I'm also addressing the issue with the foreign influence money that's coming into our colleges and universities. So I'm a doer. I get stuff done. This is a foreign policy job. I'm the only one that's actively working on foreign policy. I'm supposed to meet with the Minister of Defense in Korea. I am also going to communities where Republicans have never gone. If you want to win this seat, we have to expand the outreach of the Republican Party and open up our arms. I have large support in many minority communities: Indian, Korean, Afghani, Iranian, Muslim, Latino community. I've been endorsed by a Latino group over Latino running. I've been endorsed by veterans groups over veterans running. I was just endorsed by Moms for America today, which is a big deal. The point is, this is the end of the road for America. I need us to all stand together so we can save the Republic. It's bigger than America right now. It's about humanity, and we are literally at the end. We are facing a very, very large reset, and if we don't come together to stop it, it is completely game over. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to www.kimberlylowe.com. Thank you.
Gwen, you're next.
Hello. I want to thank you all for having me, and it's an honor to be here. I'm Gwen Hickman, running for U.S. Senate. I'm running because the polarization and division in this country is so intense that I'm called upon to stand up and say enough. I'm a lawyer, but I'm red, white, and blue, and I will stand up for our parents and protect our children. I will fight, protect, and defend our rights, freedoms, and liberties, because at the end of the day, values matter. Values like God, country, and family. Values that are enshrined in our Constitution, such as freedom of speech, the right to the Second Amendment, and a limited government. My mom was a school teacher. My dad was a nuclear physicist who worked for the U.S. Navy to ensure the success and safety of their missions, and my brother was in the Army Reserves. I became a lawyer, and for the past 30 years, I've listened to, represented, and been the voices of thousands of Virginians, litigating for them in state and federal courts. As your representative, I will listen to all Virginians statewide and find solutions. The middle class is being priced right out of the housing market, and I will work with the Senate Finance Committee to find solutions. Our public schools are failing our children, and I will be a strong proponent of school choice. Times are tough, as we know inflation is high. However, I will champion controlled spending, energy independence, reduced taxes to spur job growth. I will also go after fraud, waste, and mismanagement at the federal level. The Pentagon cannot account for $1.7 trillion. We also know that we've lost billions to Medicaid fraud and COVID fraud. And I will hold the hearings and ask the tough questions to find out who is spending our money so recklessly. And we will hold them accountable. One of the areas I practice is immigration law. I know it frontwards and backwards. And I can tell you this, the crisis on the border, the biggest deterrence to bringing in these people is stay in Mexico. We must have a strong deterrence, because we know that people are coming into this country that pose a national security threat. They are not properly being vetted. And we also see the horrific consequences of people just coming into the country and displacing U.S. citizens, veterans, and also producing a tremendous amount of resources, lost resources, that should be going to American citizens. And lastly, let me say this, our foreign policy, we know, is perceived as being weak. All starting with the Afghan withdrawal debacle. As a result, our enemies have felt emboldened. And as we see that Chinese air balloons have been floating across the U.S., hovering above military installations. We know that China is conducting military exercises in Cuba, 100 miles off the shore of Florida. We must have strong foreign policy to stop our enemies. And I will also introduce a bill that says we're not going to sell American land to China or any of our adversaries. So it's important that we rise up together and be strong. And that way we'll send a signal to Americans, to Virginians, and to the world that once again we'll be proud to say we're a Virginian and an American. God bless America. Thank you.
And you, Scott.
Well, listen, I want to start by thanking Chasing Freedom and Tom, and also just saying it's an honor to share the stage with Jonathan, Kimberly, Chuck, and Gwen. I think this is going to be a really productive conversation. So, I'm Scott Parkinson. I am running for the United States Senate to defeat Tim Kaine. Tim Kaine is a career politician that has completely lost touch with Virginia. He's been on the ballot 9 times. He's been in elected office for 30 years. And now he votes with Bernie Sanders 94% of the time. I don't think that Virginia can afford 94% of socialism. And my background, having worked for 3 United States senators and being a senior staffer in the House of Representatives, has given me the experience to actually be effective on day one for the Commonwealth of Virginia. We know that there are big issues that are facing our country. And we also know that Virginia is very much in play in 2024, thanks to the blueprint that Governor Youngkin gave us in 2021. I'm running my campaign on parents' rights, public safety, and a movement to save the middle class. In Virginia, the average household pays $12,230 more today underneath Joe Biden's policies than they did just 4 years ago underneath Donald Trump. But I'm not an average household. An average household is only 2.6 people. I'm a family of 6. I've got 4 little kids, ages 13, 8, 4, and 2. And I'm honestly deeply concerned about what the future of our country looks like for them, not just from the economic situation with their prosperity and their future, but also from a public safety perspective. We know that over 8 million illegal aliens have come across our southern border just since Joe Biden became president. We've got to have real strong border security policies, ending catch and release, and enacting catch and deport. We also know that the illegal alien population in Virginia is in all of our communities. We've heard the terrible story about the illegal alien from Venezuela down in Campbell County, a 32-year-old that sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl. It could happen to any of us. And I think that we actually need fighters that are going to fight back against the Uniparty in Washington, D.C. Last summer, I said that I was opposed to Mitch McConnell remaining as the Republican leader. Thank goodness that just a few weeks ago he announced he's not going to seek re-election in that position. But it doesn't just start with Mitch McConnell. It's all about these career politicians from Tim Kaine and Chuck Schumer. I mean, Joe Biden was elected when he was 29 years old to the United States Senate. He turned 30 that November before he was sworn in. And I've signed the term limits pledge on day one of my campaign. Term limits are important. Our founding fathers wanted people to show up to Washington, serve for a short time, and return to their communities to be productive members of society. And so this isn't going to be a career for me. It's not about me. This is about defeating Tim Kaine, Hillary Clinton's running mate in 2016. He was that close to being a heartbeat away from the presidency. And Tim Kaine's also served as the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. We know that he's got over $8 million in his bank account, waiting to attack a Republican nominee. The Democratic Party of Virginia has been attacking me since I announced on April 3rd. They say that Scott's a MAGA extremist that wants to restrict your right to an abortion, he wants to enact school choice, and he wants to repeal Obamacare. Well, the bottom line is, I have the conservative credentials to enact these policies and to fight in the United States Senate. I know the precedent, the procedure, and the rules of the United States Senate to be effective. Right now, our government is failing us. And I want to make sure that we've got a government of the people, by the people, and for the people that's actually accountable to the people. So, where is Tim Kaine? Where is he hiding? He only shows up when he's actually running for re-election, trying to raise money. Nobody ever actually sees him out in Virginia. And I think that as you see me crisscrossing our great Commonwealth, you're going to recognize that I'm the only conservative that can actually defeat Tim Kaine. I'd love to have your support. ScottParkinson.com is my website. I'm looking forward to participating today and answering all the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. I am I'm stunned by the caliber of the candidates up here again. I think that any one of you would be better than the alternative. Just a really fantastic introductions all around, and I think that one of my main points is that I always make, and Daryl's reminding me keep the microphone away from my mouth, is that everybody comes to this with a superpower. Everybody comes to it with an advantage to win, that they think that that's the advantage, the singular advantage. And I think about the strengths of each of you as candidates, and all of them are superpowers. But it's going to take a team to win. And so you've heard me ask, and I will ask it at the end, but the bottom line is we've got to be all in this together, and several of you mentioned that, so thank you. My question is, it's 3 minutes. He's going to give you the one-finger warning. I forgot to tell you that before. I know you guys all caught on to that, but I'm going to put it out there. My question is, why you? Not your credentials, not your, how are you going to be the person that can win in November over all of the other candidates? And starting the random order thing again. Let me do it now because it's almost the same order. Okay, this time we're going to start with Jonathan. Why you can win in November?
So it's critical in running against Tim Kaine that you have the ability to fight on the basis that the decisions are going to be made in this case, in this election. So what we need to do is to attack Kaine where he's weakest, and we have to have someone who has the experience in doing that very thing. He represents the deep state. He is a person who embodies this whole notion that government has the solution to all the problems, and that the American people really need to just stand in line and do what he says you need to do, which includes the whole COVID thing, which he pushed through and was the last senator to give up on emergency powers. And he has signed every trillion-plus spending bill that has come his way. And he's also a full advocate of the climate change agenda, which is destroying the fossil fuel backbone of the American economy. And he's also heavily invested in the NEA agenda for the schools, which involves transitioning, which involves teaching kids that their genders are fluid, which involves this obnoxious and outrageous form of cultural Marxism called critical race theory. To win, you must be able to argue, you must be able to present your case. It also requires a grassroots organization, which we have in spades in the state, and it's been a magnificent thing to see. People coming from all walks of life to rally behind our standard. And you need to understand that the issue in this case really decides whether or not our constitutional republic will remain. And so, he is the embodiment of everything the deep state is all about. He was part and parcel of the Clinton-Kaine agenda, which was to hang on Donald Trump the false representation that he colluded with the Russians to steal the election, when in fact Hillary Clinton was involved in actions that were of that nature. And it was a deflection. but he went after Trump and was fully behind that movement, making the false representation that the evidence was there, just as Adam Schiff did. He's never had to account. He represents himself to the people of Virginia as a moderate, but as he votes perfectly in line with Bernie Sanders, a socialist. He is a person who believes that the future of America is bleak, that we need to meld ourselves into Europe and be a socialist state, and forget about our unique role of being a beacon of light to a world in darkness, where freedom is our watchword and is what we live by and is our guiding light. We know our future lies in freedom. We are the majority, and we have to assert that majority power. My campaign represents you and that vision of America that the Founding Fathers gave us, and it will ensure the survival and success of liberty upon which this nation depends.
Gwen, you're next.
Thank you. You know, Tim Kaine is an attorney, as I am, and I can go toe-to-toe with Tim Kaine on any debate, any time, any day of the week. I am so determined from the bottom of my soul to change Virginia and the United States around. People are tired of feeling insecure, unsafe, having high prices. They want a change. I too am deeply involved with the grassroots effort across the state, where I hear these concerns, and they want a change. You know, as I said earlier, our public schools are failing our kids. I had 2 kids that went to Langley Public School, and at that time it was fine. But I do feel sorry for parents who have to have children of young age in schools at this point in time, because it's out of control, which is why I also hear loud and clear a demand for school choice. I am a person that gets a job done, unlike Tim Kaine, who does not work in the private industry. I have a small law office, and I work very hard every day, and I know what it's like to have to pay rent, open your doors every day, and work for the people. So I get it. I understand very well what the people need, how to negotiate, how to find solutions, and at all costs how to fight in court and win. So I am confident that I can beat Tim Kaine any day of the week. Thank you.
Kimberly, you're next.
We're going to win this with heart. Voting is emotional, and I am authentic, and we're moving people across the state of Virginia. It is a movement. We are calling so many people that are crying on the phone. My staff is crying because they're so moved, because people have been praying for something, and we have come to answer and solve their problems. We are moving across the state of Virginia, getting people involved who have never been involved in politics, getting groups involved that never even identified as conservative. And in order for Northern Virginia to turn red, we're going to have every single person involved that is also not Republican. We have 5 counties in Virginia that take up 50% of the Republican vote for the state, but they are the bluest the bluest counties that we have, and we can turn those by going into communities where we haven't gone before. Further, this is a spiritual journey. I feel like God has been speaking through me to deliver to the people, and as a result, people are listening, their hearts are opening up, and I'm really connecting with people across the state, and so it's getting people excited, and they're wanting to do something. And again, I have delivered across the state and solved problems. I've worked on the issues that are important to Virginians. They're nonpartisan, like parental rights. As a non-attorney, I went to the U.S. Supreme Court to challenge the rights of parents over the state, because in Virginia, you still don't have the right to know if your child has been raped or trafficked in school, even in a Republican General Assembly. So at some point, we have to toe the line, and I know that we can pull people together in order to address all of these issues.
Chuck, you're next. Why you?
We've got, I think, to face reality. We've been down this road many times before. People come, they sit at these tables, they say one thing, and they get elected, and somehow they do something else. We also face the times when people were at the very moment, at the very threshold of participating in discussions and making decisions and voting the right way, and somehow they vote the wrong way. And then we've even seen times where we thought we had the right idea, and somehow it escaped us. I believe that I am unique because I bring with me a set of skills that are unequaled ever in Virginia's history. I start with courage. Courage is important because we need people who are going to stand up. And when the going gets tough, know where their stand is and never leave there. I hope my service in the Marine Corps, at a time when people did not go in the Marine Corps, at a time when mothers and fathers falling on their knees, praying to God and country, please don't draft my son. I did it. I did that. I think that's important. I think integrity is important. I think serving, being one of 5 people from my school to be accepted in the Navy JAG Corps and serving as a Navy JAG officer, retiring after 26 years, I think that's extremely important because the military is under attack. I think it's going to take someone who understands the military laws. I also think that this is a Republican primary, and in a Republican primary, we want to find the best Republican. No matter what you may think about my opponents, I'd ask you to consider, not only am I a Republican, you know I'm a Republican, I've walked with you, I've talked with you, I've served as chairman of the largest Republican Party committee in the Commonwealth of Virginia at a time when I was chairman. We held every one of the 7 allocated General Assembly seats, all of them conservative. Also think it's important that we have someone who understands what they've done with the Constitution. We will need a lawyer. And amongst all these candidates, even though they're all good-looking people, I suggest I'm the best good-looking person. Why? Because I practice law longer than everybody in the state. In fact, longer than people who've ever run for statewide office in Virginia. In Virginia's 400-year history, Republican or Democrat. That's important going forward. We're going to beat Tim Kaine. We need to come at him from all angles. I know people have not served in the military. I get that. But on this table, I'm the only one that has not only served in the military, I've served the longest in the military among all candidates, except for one, Cal, but among all candidates running for office. I think that's important because we need someone who has the faith and who can take on Tim Kaine and beat him, rather than just say they're going to beat him. I believe I'm that candidate, and I believe I bring a unique set of skills that are unequaled by anyone at this table. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. And Scott.
Well, listen, the question is, why me? And I think when you look at the experience, when you look at the leadership skills, and then when you look at what Tim Kaine has, I think that I'm the perfect candidate to run against him. Tim Kaine last year said that it was a really, really hard decision for him because he knew that he was 65 years old at the time. He just turned 66, and it was an 8-year commitment, 2 years of running and 6 years of serving. He'd be 72 years old at the end of that term. So this summer, I'm turning 42 years old. I'm the youngest in the race, but I've also got 18 years experience. I've worked for those 3 senators. I can adjudicate Tim Kaine's record, and I can make sure that we expose him for the socialist radical that he actually is. I think that being a dad and being able to connect with the parents' rights movement, sharing our personal story with Virginians, and talking about the big solutions that I've got on public safety, parents' rights, and the economy, that's going to resonate with people, not just among all the different tribes of Virginia, from MAGA and America First, or traditional conservatives and the establishment, but also with independent voters and with soft Democrats. We know right now that independent voters are fleeing Joe Biden, and 3 in 4 of them disapprove of his handling of the economy. Heck, even 1 in 4 Democrats disapprove of Joe Biden's handling of the economy. So wouldn't it be like a good idea to just have somebody that could actually talk about the economic issues? I've worked on economic policy for 2 of those 3 senators, I've served as Republican Study Committee Executive Director, the largest caucus in the entire House of Representatives. I've worked at Club for Growth for the last 5 years as the Vice President of Government Affairs. I've worked with President Trump on those Trump tax cuts, on deregulation, on Obamacare repeal. Those are the biggest and highest level meetings that I've engaged in with the administration. And speaking of Trump, I've endorsed President Trump. We need to embrace him here in Virginia because we can actually win Virginia for Donald Trump. We need a candidate that's willing to campaign shoulder to shoulder with him. I met with President Trump in Richmond prior to his Super Tuesday rally 2 weeks ago on Saturday. And we talked a little bit about this race and how he can actually win. He knows that he's got a tremendous opportunity in front of him, and we have to win big to avoid the rig. I agree with Donald Trump on that. Election integrity is also front and center in this race. We've got to restore that integrity to the American people so that they have confidence in the electoral results of 2024.
Excellent. Okay, thank you guys. I'm now going to turn it over to the moderators. I'm not sure I remember who goes first. Michael, you go first. Okay, let me get out of the way.
All right. You guys having fun? Good stuff. Well, gentlemen and ladies, thank you for being here tonight. My question is going to be on immigration. Specifically, I'd like to know your, I guess, overall thoughts on immigration, but also specifically how you would characterize what's happening at the border. And then, being one of 100 senators, I'd like to know what you feel your impact would be when you get to Capitol Hill. Do you have an order, Don? You want to just go down the line? Yeah. So overall thoughts on immigration, and Tom, you got the order? I just asked the question. I got the question. What's the order? I asked the question. What's the order? Yeah, just, were you getting water? What were you doing? I just asked. For the record and the chairman, your overall thoughts on immigration.
Hi, yeah, thank you for the question. I actually practice immigration law, so I know it very well. We actually have a very robust immigration system. It's a system of different categories, work visas for companies who need highly specialized skills like doctors and nurses that we bring into this country. We also have skilled labor that comes in through a visa processing, again, because of the shortage of American workers in both these categories. We also have another category where moms and dads can bring in their children, brothers and sisters. That takes a long time for it to process, but we allow that, and we do it on a slow roll, so people will come in a normal processing time, and it does not overwhelm our system. Compare that to what's going on the border. The border is out of control, and the people who come into this country properly and legally are upset because they had to wait in line, while those at the border don't. They're abusing our humanitarian viewpoints in the U.S. They come in with a feigned claim of asylum, and then we let them in and wait until their case is processed. We must have a deterrence like we did under President Trump, like under House Bill 2, that says you remain in Mexico. You don't get to come into this country and wait here while we displace our U.S. citizens and veterans and others, and we pay billions of dollars for their health, education, food, and shelter. That's sending the wrong message and only invites people to come into this country illegally. We must also impose the rule of deportation of those that come in illegally outside the ports of entry. we should not be taking them in, but should immediately deport them and ship them back home. So if we have these very strong, rational, common sense policies, you will see immigration crisis start to decline. Thank you.
The border situation is a planned destruction of the United States. This is an invasion. The administration is not oblivious to it. It is causing it. And what you have are sex traffickers, drug traffickers, MS-13, 18th Street gang members pouring across the border. You have terrorists coming across the border. You have people coming across the border of all kinds not being vetted at all. This is intentional. This is diluting all of our rights, including those who came here, emigrated from other countries legally, as well as those who were born here. We are all seeing our rights being destroyed, our rights to life, liberty, and property. Because, look, the cartels are not just across the border. They're operating in the United States. I represent 2 families whose children were sex trafficked in the Fairfax County Public Schools. One was a 12-year-old girl, and the person who induced her to engage in sexual intercourse was another 12-year-old who was a member of the MS-13 gang and was an illegal alien. This is the situation we face. This is destruction of the United States, and it's intentional. Now let me tell you this. 3 things that we have to do to solve this problem. President Trump had this problem in the bag. President Trump, who I endorsed, the first candidate in this race to endorse President Trump, he took care of this brilliantly. But let me tell you 3 solutions to this problem. First, yes, finish the border wall construction. Second thing is, we cannot trust DHS. DHS and Alejandro Mayorkas are globalists. They do not believe in protection of the United States. They, like Biden, have abandoned the executive branch role of being commander-in-chief and defending the nation from illegal entry. So what do we have to do? We need block grants to the border states willing to defend the border, to hire National Guard and police necessary to do it. And the third thing, most importantly, that we need to solve this problem, we need to amend the asylum laws so that you may not put 1 foot into the United States and seek asylum. And if you do, you will be permanently banned from U.S. citizenship and subject to immediate deportation. And we need to move to the U.S. embassies in their country of origin or in an adjacent country the immigration processing and the asylum seeking, so that if you seek asylum, the only way to do it is outside the United States, and you're going to be vetted outside the United States before you can ever come into this country. And last, we need to take care of the cartels, because these organizations are nations in and of themselves attacking the United States regularly. We have thousands of drones coming into the United States monthly from foreign powers, from the cartels, from enemies of the United States, and from terrorists. And we have no action by this administration to stop it. This all must be changed. I will introduce legislation to do it.
So you got to use the power of the purse to enforce border security. And I also think that the executive branch and judicial nomination is incredibly important as it pertains to our border policies. We know that the Democrats right now are taking advantage of the Biden executive orders that are ultimately purposeful to change the fabric of America. And we are a nation of immigrants. There's no doubt about it. Just look at Nova with our big immigrant population. But those people did come here legally. And what we are concerned about is this illegal alien invasion. And it is an invasion along the southern border. It's even starting to happen along the northern border with Canada as well. So what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it as individual leaders? How are we going to use the bully pulpit that we have as senators to fight back against the media that is basically sweeping this invasion under the rug for President Biden? Laken Riley's murder from the Venezuelan illegal alien in Georgia is just one case study for what is happening in communities all across America. And it is completely unacceptable to, I think, all of us that are here presenting to you before you today. So when you think about how are you going to have a prohibition on allowing illegal aliens to vote? How are you going to have a prohibition on funding for sanctuary cities? How are you going to enforce these border security policies at the various agencies from the Homeland Security and at the Department of Justice when it comes to our purse powers? We know that the appropriation bills in the United States Senate and in the House of Representatives are the really only effective tool to confronting an unaccountable executive branch and a tyrannical president like Joe Biden. So I'm going to be the United States Senator that filibusters an appropriations bill that doesn't accomplish border security, that doesn't defund sanctuary cities, that doesn't take care of our electoral system where illegals are voting. I'm deeply worried about what this means from fentanyl in all of our communities. We've heard the stories in Loudoun, we've heard the stories in Wakefield, we've heard the stories all across rural Virginia, and this is not just an issue of junkies, this is an issue of people that are being exposed to that poison from our law enforcement community and from first responders and our healthcare workers. I want to make sure that we are getting that crap out of our communities, and it starts with confronting China, who's sending it to the southern border, and it's not just an issue of Arizona, Texas, and California. It is here in Virginia. We've got to stop the fentanyl crisis.
So you see, I don't think this is a long question at all. I don't think this question deserves a long discussion. For the record, my good friend Jonathan should know that I endorsed Trump in 2015. We have to look at our overrun schools. We have to look at our overrun hospitals. We've got to look at the crime on our streets. I think the days of moderation, I think the days of we can't deport, I think those ships have sailed. You have to ask yourself a question. If you have a bathtub that's filling up with water and at a point that it's being overrun, do you unplug it at the bottom so the water can drain out? Or do you turn the water off? Which one do you do first? I say you do them both. We have to stop all immigration into this country until we get our border fixed. It doesn't take a long discussion. We have to get our border under control. 11 million people 10 years ago, and they said we couldn't deport them. Now we've got upwards of 20 million. We have to deport people illegal. What in the word illegal do we not understand?
Let me guess, it must be my turn. So we are on a multi-decades plan to destroy our country. First, they destroy God. They indoctrinate our children. They change, alter our history. They indoctrinate our children. And the very last step of the plan is to flood your borders and take your country over. Just in 2021, more documented illegals, over 10 million, came in, which is more than the population of Virginia just in 1 year. Those are the ones that they knew about. This is very simple. This is called common sense immigration policy. We've seen it happen in the past. We close our border off by a couple of ways. I have spent an extensive amount of time at the border. I have trekked cartel trails with an AR where the cartel are. I did not play it safe. I have been in holding facilities where 300 to 500 people were coming through per day in Eagles Pass, where the cartel are running these nonprofits, overseeing it to traffic the people heading through there. The Democrats need to understand this is not humane. I met a mother from Haiti whose son drowned when they were crossing the Rio Grande. Children are being drugged to cross. These families are having to owe the cartel $5,000, $10,000, and the cartels are ever morphing all the time. You can't keep up with how the cartels are operating. They change it, they morph, it's extremely violent. Families are risking their lives being with children and women and even men being raped and murdered through the Darien Gap, where they go to the southern border of Mexico. From there, the United Nations is giving all of these people money and medical care, and then the Mexican government is transporting them to our border so they can just walk across. We deal with this by dealing with Mexico. The border wall doesn't work. Trump actually had enough money to take care of the border wall. Biden sold it all off, all the materials, for around $150,000. But I can tell you, they are climbing it. The cartel has keys to it. The border wall's not going to totally stop it, but what will stop it is good policy. You stop funding anything to do with the United Nations. You work on trade deals with Mexico to shut them down. You send our military down there and close it off, because what's coming across this country is a huge national security risk, and we can defend other countries' borders like Ukraine and Russia, but we can't defend our own because they want to destroy America, and they are being successful at it. But good policy will stop this. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have one follow-up. I think Chuck and Kimberly both touched on it. Trump has talked several times about a deportation force once he's in office, and you mentioned that as well, Chuck. I'd like you to just go down the line with a yes or no on whether you would support a deportation force when Trump is reelected.
If you're talking about deportation against illegal entries, the answer is yes.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see the details on that exactly, but my policy is catch and deport criminal aliens. When they are caught, they need to be immediately deported.
You have to uphold the rule of law. It needs to be one rule of law, and those who are here illegal you have to be deported.
I never answer yes or no questions because it's always way more complex. And if I want a place in a Senate committee,
100%.
The intent of this section is to take 10, 15 minutes and really do a deep dive into the immigration issue, right? And so you guys, I think, in one way or another, have hit on a lot of the different topics. I recently looked at the numbers, and I did a real State of the Union address, my own real State of the Union address, and I went and looked at some of the data. When Trump left office, the border encounters were at about 16,500 a month. Almost every single month since Joe Biden has gotten into office, the border encounters have been 250,000 encounters every single month almost for the last 3 years. That's where that number of 8 million to 12 million immigrants coming across the border comes from. So we're talking about something that I don't think in world history, I cannot think of a time when 12,000 or 12 million foreigners were allowed to pour into a country. The deportation, all of these things, okay, we're talking about a monumental effort because we had millions of illegals before that. I think we've got to, this is just my thought, and I'd be curious what your thoughts are on it. What policies can we change that would reduce the incentive for people to immigrate here illegally, and at this put in place laws that we could put in place, and at the same time, what changes could we make that would disincentivize them from staying? Because I think you need a voluntary departure as opposed to a forced deportation, which I think we need that. But I'm saying that there's a voluntary departure element to this. And what kind of policies or things, and it's a free-for-all, so just raise your hand if you think you have an idea. Go ahead, Chuck. You were the first one.
Stop giving them the right to vote. Stop giving them driver's licenses. Stop providing the incentives where not just them, but the people coming after them. Okay. It's not complicated. We're providing the incentives for mom, grandma, cousin, niece, other families down the chain to come to the United States. And they're coming in droves. If we truly understand the word illegal, we would not be doing that. That's not what the Biden administration either understands or agrees with.
So in October, I went to the border of the San Diego sector, and I worked with the CBP chief going throughout the border area. And let me say this, the major incentive to come across is our doing, and it is through the government, through the administration. What are they doing? They've moved almost all of the Border Patrol agents from the border to human processing. And what is human processing? Human processing takes place in 130,000 square foot tents that are designed to keep people for 72 hours and then let them into the United States. And they put them in there, and this is what the processing is. It's signing them up for welfare. It's signing them up for food stamps. It's giving them a cell phone that they can use indefinitely, apparently, with no cost. It's getting them signed up for Medicaid. It's getting them access to education, either entirely paid for by taxpayers or heavily subsidized by taxpayers. It's getting them transportation wherever they want to go in the United States through non-governmental organizations at train stations, bus terminals, and airports, where the non-governmental organizations, we pay for 100% taxpayer funded, buy the tickets and send them everywhere. First thing we got to do is get rid of all of that. The second thing we have to do very clearly is to immediately deport those who are here illegal. And when it comes to those in the population, we are building, it's not 8 million people who are here operating illegally in the United States. It's more like 20 to 30 million. And they form an underground economy. And they are the people that we see in the city streets in the morning on the corner looking to get that contract job where they get paid under the table in cash, below minimum wage. And you just can't survive on that alone. So if you're already illegal and you can't get a legal job, what do? What do the 20 to 30 million people do? 65% of them are on welfare. We have to get rid of that. That'll help them go home. But secondarily, we have to ensure that we enforce the law, because a lot of these people are going into criminal activities to make it. Sex trafficking, drug trafficking. The cartels make more money off sex trafficking than they do off drug trafficking. Sex trafficking is ubiquitous in our state. You go to every major suburban area, we've got a massive sex trafficking problem here. And it's because of the whole border situation. Governor Youngkin's right. Virginia is a border state. It really is.
Does anybody else have anything? Go ahead, Scott. Kimberly.
I think Jonathan laid it out in a pretty good comprehensive way too, but the bottom line is if you eliminate their access to all the anti-poverty welfare benefit programs that exist, it's going to cut off their ability to live here self-sufficiently. And that's not even self-sufficiency in the first place, because they're completely relying on the federal government to make ends meet. And so that means cutting off their access to public housing. It means cutting off their access to food stamps. It means no more credit cards, no more hotel rooms, no more benefits from the federal taxpayer. And then I think also when we have a Republican president, they're going to get the signal that Donald Trump is going to be serious about enacting the rules and the laws that are on the books as they stand prior to Joe Biden waiving Remain in Mexico and things like that. So ultimately, you need to send the signal to the caravans, and you got to send the signal to the cartels by designating them as, you know, a criminal terrorist organization, and making sure that we confront that with the U.S. military. We can't just place the burden on the Texas National Guard or the Arizona National Guard. This is an issue of American sovereignty. And so when we think about enforcing our sovereignty, it starts by using the military. The commander-in-chief needs to be able to do that. The imminent threat is there. We know that terrorists are coming across the border. They just caught a guy recently, I think on March 9th or something, from Lebanon, and he was a part of Hezbollah. These stories are all out there, but that's just one person. How many lone wolves are out there? You guys remember the old Reagan ad against the USSR and the Cold War? It said, if a bear is out there, wouldn't it be great to have somebody to stand up against the bear? And George W. Bush tried to have a similar analogy with wolves in a park for his 2004 re-election campaign, in equating that to the terrorist population that might be out there. We know that it's out there right now. So what are we going to do as American citizens to confront it? I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And I know, having gone to all these gun shows, and I see some of my primary opponents out there too, they're all strong supporters of the Second Amendment. And what I do not want to see is people having to resort to their last line of defense. So that means we've got to make sure that the U.S. military is protecting American citizens.
Go ahead. I think Kimberly was next, and then we'll get Gwen. And I'm going to go down and let somebody in at the door.
So this is a policy fix. Trump's policies worked to stifle the amount of movement across the border. But big picture, we need to look at the globalist agenda, along with continually planned nations being overthrown around the world by the American government through the CIA. We have had many, many countries that were sovereign, that did not have a central bank, that had a great economy and a good life for their citizens. And the American CIA came in, toppled countries, which caused mass migrations. Further, with good foreign policy, we would have never had the issues between Ukraine and Russia. As a result, everybody's borders are being flooded with Ukrainians. So we have to look at foreign policy to stop this. We also have to look at the economy. Right now, we are in the midst of de-dollarization. We have lost our sanctioning power. We are losing our power as a world power. Other countries are forming together through BRICS in order to do trade and business. They are going to be asset, commodity-backed, and much stronger than America. They're already putting embargoes on America. So we have to fix our economics, deal with the globalist agenda, have policies like we had before, and stop the weaponization of the American government to the rest of the world. Thank you.
So the vast majority of the people that are coming across our southern border are coming because of economic conditions in their homeland are dire. They're coming here really not for asylum, although they feign asylum claims. They are coming here for a better way of life. So, how do you stop that? These governments that they're coming for are on the verge of collapse, and they do not have a good economy for their own people. The U.S. government must get involved with these countries and help fix their policies, or firmly put down their foot and say, you can't let your people come into our country, or there will be sanctions and consequences. And lastly, the one thing that we can do, because they will not voluntarily deport themselves. However, we can tell all our federal judges and hire more and send them to the southern border and have them quickly adjudicate those cases, and 75% then will be deported back to their homeland. That's a real solution to get these cases going fast instead of waiting for 5, 6, 7 years before these immigrants will ever see a judge. Thank you.
All right, found the button. Yeah, and I see Rich Anderson just showed up, so thanks for showing up. It's good to see you. Yeah, so heard a lot of your talk about immigration, so we're going to segue a little bit into a topic you've already hit on a little bit, but very near and dear to my heart, because I'm retired Air Force and I rely on the federal government for a lot of my money. And I do realize that you are running for U.S. Senate, so a federal position, and we talked about some of the power of the purse, and you don't directly control the power of the purse, but you do have a lot of influence in it. And so I'm going to give you a 1-2 punch question, 2 of them here. But I think it definitely is very specific to the economy and things that you can influence. And part of my question, or 1-2 question, is also, I think, might be a way that you could also reduce some of the legislation and reduce some of the paperwork that directly affects all of us in this room. And so, that said, I'm going to put on my glasses here and read you what I got here regarding the economy. And I believe we're going to have a 3-minute limit, and Rich is going to give you the timing here. But so when we think about the economy, I'm curious what your thoughts are about the federal minimum wage, not the state minimum wage, but the federal minimum wage, and how you can impact that. And then also, I would like your opinion on what you think about institutionalizing a flat tax federally. So the 2 questions are flat tax
and a national minimum wage. What are your thoughts on that?
All right, so I think I'm the only candidate who's publicly announced my support for a flat tax. I believe that a flat tax is the best way to solve our problem. Graduated income tax is really a redistribution scheme, and it really is ruinous to productivity in America. What we do need is a flat tax. What I would do is I would eliminate the income tax for anyone who earns under $100,000 a year. because I want to inspire an economic boom in this country, which gives opportunity, and then put it at 10% all the way up. And the reason why I say that is that we need to downsize both the size and scope of the federal government substantially. Get rid of the Department of Education, get rid of the Department of Commerce, get rid of the Department of Energy. Substantially reduce the nature and size of the bureaucracy. Pass a law that I wrote for Congressman Ron Paul, which he introduced several times, called the Congressional Responsibility and Accountability Act. What that would do is make every proposed regulation have no legal force or effect unless passed into law by Congress, thus reestablishing separation of powers and also substantially reducing the regulatory tax that is imposed on the American people and on industry through the regulatory state. Then your second question went to the minimum wage. There should be no federal minimum wage. Why do I say that? Because a roaring economic, a roaring economy depends on a vibrant free enterprise system. When the federal government sets a minimum wage, what it really is doing is telling for every business in this country and for every person that if you are willing to do the job for less, you cannot be employed to do that job for less. And the employer can't have the benefit of that. Instead, it's going to be a central bureaucratized answer. No one can be employed unless you, the employer, pay this amount. It distorts the marketplace. It reduces the availability of goods and services. It increases the costs of goods and services. It is in and of itself inflationary. We need to get inflation under control and get it back down the way it was under the Trump administration and under the Reagan administration after he got his Economic Recovery Tax Act passed. The solutions to our problems lie in reducing the size and scope of the government, repealing the climate change agenda, getting gas prices back down to $2 a gallon, getting groceries affordable again, and all of this depends on growing the economic pie, and getting the government out of our lives. And when it comes to the minimum wage, that's just yet another example of government interfering with our lives. We need a meritocracy throughout, and that incentivizes people to do what the free market, what Adam Smith advises. It is not through, as Adam Smith said, it is not through the benevolence of the butcher and baker that you get your meat and bread by his pursuit of his own self-interest. And that indeed is the genius of the marketplace, and it is responsible for elevating the economic standard of living in this country profoundly. And we need to get back to that.
Thank you, Jonathan. All right, Tom, who's next? He's got it here. Gwen.
So regarding the federal minimum wage, I quite frankly think it's fine to have a very low federal minimum wage, and that's to protect people who may otherwise be taken advantage by corporations, right, or the federal government. However, I do have a problem when they excessively increase that wage, because that should be a product of capitalism. Again, help a little, but don't over exceed the boundaries. Regarding a flat tax, there again, I find an issue. If you have a flat tax, those that can't afford or make lower income really are going to have less disposable income at the end of the day if you tax them the same as you do for someone who makes more money. So what I'd like to see instead is a reduction of taxes for the middle class, because the middle class are paying the burden of the federal government.
All right, thank you. And Tom? Chuck.
Well, we probably want to write this moment down. This is one of the only times that Jonathan and I agree. I agree. Look, I approach it perhaps from, that's right. Good looking. I approach it from a different aspect. When I taught as an adjunct professor constitutional law at Regent University, I would remind the students that, what Jonathan said, that if we get back to the Constitution, all of our problems go away. And we really could get back to the 10 amendments. But government was never meant to be big. It was never meant to do all things for all people at all times. The 10th Amendment is there for a reason, which goes something like this. All power, not specifically delegated to the federal government, nor prohibited by it to the state, belongs to whom? The states and to the people. And so there's a bureaucracy that has become so large, so big, that now we're having discussions about $15 an hour. No. We should let the economy, the market, drive the economy. And so, I could spend all day on the Constitution. You don't want to hear all that. Our number one problem is the border. Our number two close second is getting back to the Constitution. They have completely destroyed that. But I think a lot of what we see in what I call a defunct economy comes from what I perceive as a derision of the Constitution.
Thank you, Chuck. All right, Tom. Scott.
So let's tackle.
It's the Chinese.
They're always listening. It is a fact, actually. So let's tackle the minimum wage question first. I think it's a great question, but who's actually getting the minimum wage? Usually, it's young people that are having their first job. My first job, I made $5.15 an hour. And it was actually, I thought something was pretty awesome. I got a paycheck. I learned good behaviors. I learned how to work hard. And you know what? Ultimately, it's merit-based. When you work hard and you actually do a good job, you get what's called a raise. And we need to actually foster that economic environment for job creators and entrepreneurs where they can hire people that are interested in learning a skill. And when they learn the skill, they can actually move up. And whether that's using your hands and becoming a shipbuilder, or whether or not you're going to be, somebody that is athletic and strong and, a delivery person, all the things that go into work ethic are really, really important for our economy. And right now, the biggest problem that we have is that a lot of people go to four-year universities and they get a philosophy degree or some degree where there's not a market to hire them, and instead they are staring up at the ceiling at an Obama poster, maybe a Joe Biden poster, maybe Tim Kaine and Hillary Clinton, right? But the thing is, they're not actually learning a skill and they're not employable. So I want to make sure that we oppose this radical Green New Deal, AOC, Tim Kaine idea of a living wage that's only going to create a tremendous burden on job creators, and instead we foster an economic system with low regulation and low taxes so more people can get hired, get the skills necessary to be successful inside the economy. Now the question to a flat tax. Of course, I think a flat tax would be a tremendous idea. It would foster an economic boom in a way that America has never experienced before. The federal income tax right now is punishing the wealthy who are paying a majority of the overall dollars in federal taxation. And so when you're trying to make sure that we've got the ability to invest and reinvest and grow a business, you want to decrease the cost of capital and decrease the cost of labor. And so I think all that goes together when you think about the tax and regulatory regime that we employ right now through the federal government that's stifling innovation and stifling job creation and risk-taking. A flat tax is a good idea. The question is, where do you start the level where the low rate, Jonathan mentioned 10%, that'd be a fantastic low rate, but where do you start it? So, because if you're going to add in a tax at $10,000 or $50,000, that's a big difference for how many people are going to pay a 10% tax. He mentioned $100,000. That question needs to be studied, but we need to make sure that the government is starved, and that starts by reducing federal spending, which every spending increase is a future tax increase.
Thank you, Jonathan. Now, Scott. Scott, I'm sorry.
I feel like I'm
Kimberly.
last a lot. I'm not
Sorry.
liking your random thing back there at all. But I'm first. No, so I think we're thinking too much in the box. The IRS is unconstitutional. The 16th Amendment was not ratified. Our federal taxes do not fund spending. We are not going to continue at the rate that we're going. We are supposedly $34.4 trillion in debt. I didn't look at the numbers today. I'm sure it's more. The Federal Reserve is a private entity. It is not owned by the federal government. We do not have an asset-backed currency. We are printing money from air. This is very fixable. I believe strongly that the Federal Reserve is going to die very soon. You can see countries are pulling out all of their treasury bills right now. You can also see that big entities like BlackRock are floating our digital currencies as well. So basically, they are putting a Band-Aid on a situation that's about to go down. You're about to have a huge mortgage crisis. I believe that the Federal Reserve is going to end. We're going to crash. A lot more banks are going to close. As of March 11th, the feds can no longer bail out banks. They had to have a certain number of assets commodity backed in order to even continue. So we're not going to continue on this trajectory. So you can't even talk about flat tax. What I would support is the National Economic Security and Reformation Act, which addresses all of this. And you watch, you get rid of this nonsense debt that isn't even real. We're paying we don't even know who, which is a large percentage of our GDP. All of a sudden rates are going to go down, inflation is going to go down. We stop paying terrorists for energy, which is what we're doing right now, and billions of dollars while we have homeless veterans and teachers that are having to work 2 jobs right now. This is all fixable with common sense policy, but nobody's had the backbone to stand up and tell the American people how it really is, and it is fixable. As far as the minimum wage is concerned, you cannot tell a private business how much to pay their employers. This is America. We are a free country. It should be a free market enterprise. $15 per hour is not enough for families. I see people where it is not their second job where they are making $15 per hour. Not all people were blessed enough to be able to afford to go to college. And normal people are out there making that, and they're having to work 2 jobs. And that has to come to an end. It comes to an end by ending centralized banking and having some common sense, money sense with our budget. I mean, anyway, it's a long story I could go on about, but I'm not lying to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. And so, like Mike, I'm going to give you one last question, if I can get a yes or no on this, and I think some of you have already addressed it. And if you noticed, I'm wearing a green tie, so happy belated St. Patrick's Day. So have to get that out there. So, but again, thank you all for very, very much for being here. So my final question is just we'll go down the line if you don't mind. And if we do get President Trump in office again, would you be willing to support getting rid of the IRS?
I really can't answer that question at this point.
Scott?
I think that we need to make sure that we extend the Trump tax cuts. Those are going to be up in 2025. That happens through the federal income tax system that we have through the IRS right now, and that's what will actually be in play. I think that the IRS is punishing people. The 87,000 agents need to be disbanded, and they certainly need to be disarmed. But whether or not we're going to abolish the IRS, I think in a perfect world, that's a great idea. We don't live in a perfect world. We live in a system where we need to make sure that we fund our military, and that means that you got to collect some revenue from the people to fund it.
We adopted the flat tax proposal that I've recommended that we can abolish the IRS. We need to make taxation simple, and I mean very simple. You should be able to look at your income, take 10% of it, and determine that that's all you have to pay when you make $100,000 or more. If you don't make $100,000, you shouldn't pay anything. And that's the way we should operate. You know, tithing operates this way, 10% in New Jersey. And we have tremendous compliance with 10%. You know, when President Reagan's Economic Recovery Tax Act was passed, they cut the marginal rates. And everybody predicted Arthur Laffer was wrong. They said, no, that more revenue is not going to come into the government. And they said this is going to be another disaster, huge shortfall in revenue. While there was a little shortfall in revenue, the long-term effect
John,
of the economic
it
recovery
was-
raised.
It was supposed to be a yes or no
sorry,
answer.
sorry.
By the way, I
And
want to
so-
reclaim
no,
my
it was-
time because
no.
that's not, none of them were yes or no.
Yeah.
So I'm going to reclaim my time at the end.
That's what I was going to offer. I was going to offer back to Gwen, and to Scott, if you'd like to take a little bit of time to answer it, because I think this is a. Go ahead, Gwen. Go ahead. Take some time and
You know,
elaborate.
honestly, if you're asking yes or no, you got to answer yes or no. Am I right?
I would say yes. However,
Yes or no?
However, he's had an opportunity to speak a little bit, and I want to make sure everybody has the same amount of time. Go
right?
ahead. Gwen.
Okay. So, it really is not a yes or no question, as you see, and my response, quite frankly, is it needs to be modified. There is no doubt that the middle class is taking the brunt. They support America. The small businesses are the backbone of America. Let's help the small business, give them a tax break. Let's help the middle class. Let's help them have housing that is now out of their reach. And we can do this if we modify the tax code to give the middle class the help they so desperately need.
Do you have anything additional, Scott, or are you good? Go ahead, Kimberly. Not yes or no, but be brief.
I'm so excited I get to talk. This is why I love this job so much. No, right? So I already said that the IRS needs to be abolished. It has been weaponized against the American people. Taxes at the federal level absolutely do not fund spending at all. We do not have a commodity-based dollar. We are in the middle of de-dollarization. I believe that we're going to shift to something other than the dollar, like a U.S. note that will be commodity and asset-backed. But I would abolish it. There's no reason to have it. It's unconstitutional, and it really does not fund spending. It's a Ponzi scheme.
Chuck.
Yes.
There you go. Thank you. I do have another question. And I think I call this the Tom Curveball question. And we'll give everybody 3 minutes to try and answer this question. We talked about sort of the economy generally, but and a few people mentioned education, and ultimately, how do you think? What would you recommend, or what would you advocate for with regard to our education system that would have the effects in our economy that we really, really need? Because I'm like a huge fan of Elon Musk and what he's doing with SpaceX, and we're talking about real STEM here. We're talking about real hard science. And our enemies are focused on real hard science, and we're here studying philosophy, right? So, and physical fitness, I guess, and sports medicine, which are all important. But what would you advocate for to take us into the next epoch of American, economic supremacy in the world? What do you think we need to do as it applies to education to take us forward? And I'm going to randomly. Okay, we'll do 2 minutes. And I know that's a big question, but just as briefly as possible in 2 minutes. And we're going to start with... We're going to start with Gwen.
There you go.
Be brief, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. So my daughter is in virtual and augmented reality, which is pretty cool, hard science. But it all starts with education. And the earlier you teach kids about STEM, science, technology, education, and math, the better off you are. And make it fun. If you have proper education from the beginning, they're going to go there. Not only should you support community schools and colleges, but trade schools, any other type of apprenticeship, anything that will help get the younger generation to have a successful path moving forward. It's never too late to go back to school, pick up skills. There are all types of certification programs that people can get without a college degree. So I think the public messaging from the leaders should be highly focused on helping the youth and get them excited and get them engaged, because it's amazing stuff. AI is amazing as well. So just grab them young, and they'll be on your side, trust me. Thank you.
And next is going to be Kimberly.
So I taught grades 6 through 12 in inner city schools. I was told my expectations were too high. I needed to change their grades. I was spending too much time with the kids after school, and that I needed to show more movies. And I thought, well, I cannot continue to be a teacher if this is how it is. For standards of learning for federal money, they were changing their grades in order to obtain the funding that they needed. So first thing I would do is I would abolish the Department of Education. It is ineffective. We need to give it back to the states because every state has a different type of things that they cover, different jobs, whatever jobs they need filled. I don't necessarily think that we should gear children towards a job. I think that we need to allow kids to be kids. And I'll tell you, even when I had 12th graders, they still could not read or write. They don't know the basic things. We have other countries that are models where at the ages of 4 and 5, they speak 5 different languages and they can do all sorts of science. We need to stop importing people from other countries in order to take American jobs. We can train our students here. We need to change our school system around completely. It is a totally post-industrial era education system, and it is fixable, but it's got to go right now. It's failing our students across the country.
John.
The reason why our education system is failing in the United States, public education is failing with terrible results. Kids coming out of high school with the inability to read, inability to do basic math equations, totally lost in science. The reason why this is happening is because centralized, bureaucratized education is necessarily a failure. Now we add to that a woke agenda, and the whole woke agenda in the schools is ruining our kids on a number of levels, destroying our understanding of history. We need true school choice. We need competition in education. The way you're going to solve the problem is to allow parents who have the greatest interest in their own children being given the freedom to leave public schools and go into the private schools of their choice, micro schools and other schools, that enable them to get the kind of educational training they need and is tailored based on private decisions as to what the marketplace needs and what the nation needs, as opposed to centralized bureaucratic decisions about curriculum and about how to allocate time in school and about how not to discipline kids in school, and the whole lot that is really destroying education. So true school choice, what does that mean? That means that, for example, in Fairfax County Public Schools, utter disaster, $21,000 a year roughly for each kid is expended in public dollars for each child in the Fairfax County Public Schools. If parents had access to that $21,000 and could go to any school they would want, they would depopulate largely the Fairfax County Public Schools. Their whole ruination of Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, replacing meritocracy with what they're going to try, race-based admissions, rather than meritocratic decision-making, discriminating against Asians, calling them white adjacent, because they had such good test scores. This is the ruination of education. We need to educate, and we need to do it well. And the way to do it well is to have competition in education, to give parents greater control over the education.
Thank you, John. And Chuck.
Somebody's got to tell Jonathan to stop taking my speech. We need to move the Department of Education to the state. Constitution says it. Move the Department of Education to the state. Get back to teaching basics, math, science, English. My mother was an English school teacher, and she would always come home with varying situations where the kids can't even read and write and spell. And we see a lot of that going on right now, particularly with a lot of this woke stuff. We need to get our country back, and we do that by letting money follow the kids. We need to stop this dictation to parents. Ask you what is the best school or what is the proper environment for their children. I firmly believe that we get our country back when we raise better people. We raise better people by them coming through the basics. Of course, they need the science, they need the math, they need the English, and they need other courses. But what they don't is this race-based technology, which dictates the areas or factors that parents. It's crazy for parents to have their children go to school and have little Johnny or little Sue be read to out of some gay textbook because this is what the teacher thinks the child needs. We need to get our country back by getting our schools back. I think we can do that with funding the Department of Education and getting kids back to learning the basics so they can compete nationally and internationally.
Thank you, Chuck. And Scott, you've got the Tom Speciale preferred position. Go ahead.
My fourth time, number 5. So, first of all, yes, eliminate the Department of Education. I do think that K through 12 should be administered by the states. I strongly support the Arizona bill, which is universal educational savings accounts. It's commonly referred to as the backpack bill. It's common sense. We've got to create that competition among schools and zip codes and not have the money following educational institutions. But the bottom line is here, as federal lawmakers, we need to stand up and fight back for our kids. And that means no more shutting down our schools, no more vaccine mandates, no mask mandates, no more telling us how to parent our own children. And we've got to be advocates inside the classroom for our kids, even if it's being done by the states. I'm a dad. I've got 4 kids. My oldest daughter dealt with bullying in middle school because she wasn't vaccinated. And when you pick up a little girl and she's got tears streaming down her face because kids won't let her sit next to them in lunch, it gets you fired up and it gets you motivated to run for the United States Senate. My children are why I'm running. We've got to restore our parents' voices. We've got to make sure that we've got public safety in our communities, and we need to rebuild the economy for those kids. Workforce development is also incredibly important. We know that the skills are lacking right now in Hampton Roads in those key industries. And so when people learn the skills, it's going to cause more human flourishing, and the macroeconomic effects all across our country that lead to an economic boom that creates more prosperity than ever before for all communities and all people.
Thank you, Scott. Okay. Just real quickly down the line, I'd like to make sure that you get a chance to put your website out and how people can contact your campaign. We'll start with Chuck at your end. Just your website and where they can contact you.
ChuckSmithVA.com. My cell phone that everyone has, 757-270-1715.
Thank you. My website is www.kimberlylowe.com. If you're here tonight, I have business cards in the back, and the number goes straight to my cell phone. If you go on the website and message it, it goes straight to my cell phone as well.
teamworkforva.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and elsewhere. And you can contact me directly by dialing 202-466-6937.
My website is scottparkinson.com. On X, I am at Scott T. Parkinson. On Instagram, I'm at STP4VA24. And we are building that movement. We need everybody's support. Sign up and volunteer at scottparkinson.com. Thank you.
Yes, you can contact me at Hickman4, that's FOR, Senate.com. And you can also reach out to me by email at contact@hickmanforsenate.com. Thank you.
I just want to ask everybody to give a round of applause for the candidates for coming tonight. I was reminded to tell you all that we have a national security forum that is going to be moderated by a special guest who we've told you privately. It's a by invitation only event. If you don't know that yet, because I know some of you may not know who the special guest is moderating, but that's on April 9th. It's going to be at the same time. It's going to be in Arlington, at the Arlington, Virginia VFW post number 3150. But it's by invitation only. All the candidates are invited, and it's going to be focused very specifically on the national security. So we've got a lot of high-ranking military officers and retired military officers in attendance. Thank you guys all again for coming. Rich, will you come up and please pray us out?
Bow our heads, please. Lord God, thank you so much again for waking us up. I just pray, Lord God, for safe passage for everyone back today. Travel mercies back. I thank all the candidates one more time. In Christ, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, everyone.